She dropped the tool. Her hands trembled. He laughed. She can't even hold the rifle. 7 minutes later, he was saluting her. She didn't come to prove herself. She came to extinguish a flame from 2,685 meters, with hands too shaky to button a uniform and a past too classified to be believed. They saw a civilian. What they didn't see was the former Delta sniper behind those trembling hands. A legend hidden by neurological damage, and the prototype she carried was more than metal. It was her redemption. This is the true story of Lieutenant Colonel Celeste Moreau, of the day she silenced every voice that doubted her with one shot. You're watching Veteran Biker. We know you're here. Drop a 1 if you're new, or 2 if you've been with us. Like, subscribe, and prepare to be humbled. The desert sun beat down mercilessly on Fort Ridgeback, a crucible where only the sharpest steel of the U.S. Delta Force unit, Shadow Viper, was forged. Dust devils danced across the range, miniature tornadoes of grit and sand, mimicking the controlled chaos of the live fire drills. Every crack of a rifle, every clang of a round hitting its mark, was a testament to the unyielding precision demanded of these elite operators. Their uniforms, caked with the sweat and dust of 100 training evolutions, blended seamlessly with the harsh, unforgiving landscape. These were men and women carved from the bedrock of defiance, honed to a razor's edge, their reputations built on an almost mythical ability to put lead on target under any conceivable pressure. Today, however, a different kind of tension hung in the air, a hum of curiosity bordering on outright derision. It wasn't the familiar anticipation of a complex tactical exercise, but rather the collective bewilderment at an anomaly in their meticulously ordered world. A civilian vehicle, an unassuming olive-drab SUV that looked jarringly out of place among the armored transports and tactical buggies, had arrived at the perimeter. Its dust-caked exterior spoke of a long journey, but its presence here on a live-fire Delta Force range screamed anomaly. From the driver's side, a figure emerged, moving with a hesitant, almost delicate gait that immediately set her apart. Dr. Celeste Moreau. The name had been whispered, passed around like an ill-fitting joke, through the ranks of Shadow Viper for the past hour. Uninvited, unwelcome, her hands, even from a distance, seemed to possess a life of their own, trembling with a subtle but incessant rhythm, as if playing a silent, frantic drum solo against her will. She was slender, almost frail, her frame dwarfed by the heavy-set, battle-hardened operators around her. Her eyes, though, held a quiet intensity, a depth that hinted at hidden reserves, even as the visible tremors in her hands betrayed a profound vulnerability. Sergeant Lars McKinney, a bear of a man with a beard the color of sun-bleached sand and eyes that had seen too much, spat a stream of tobacco juice into the dust. He was a veteran operator, his every movement radiating a grizzled competence earned through countless deployments. He watched Celeste approach, a sneer twisting his lips. "Who in God's name is that?" he muttered, his voice a low growl, loud enough for those around him to hear. "She looks like she's about to blow away in the next gust." Specialist Ren Ishikawa, sharper and more observant than most, watched Celeste with a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. Ren was a woman of lean muscle and quiet efficiency, her movements economical, her gaze piercing. She had heard the whispers, the snide remarks, but she kept her counsel. There was something about Celeste's composure, despite her apparent physical frailty, that gave Ren pause. As Celeste drew closer, the tremors in her hands became undeniable. When she reached into a worn canvas bag slung over her shoulder, her fingers fumbled, briefly struggling with the zipper. McKinney scoffed, loud enough for her to hear. "Looks like she can't even hold a scope tool, let alone a rifle." A ripple of low chuckles spread through the squad. 12 elite shooters, the best of the best, their faces etched with a mixture of amusement and disdain. They watched her, their posture a collective judgment, their silence punctuated only by the distant reports of their comrades on other ranges. Celeste, seemingly oblivious to their mockery, retrieved a small gleaming scope adjustment tool. Her hands, despite their persistent tremor, held the delicate instrument with an odd precision, her focus absolute. Yet, as she attempted to attach it to a rifle case she had laid on a nearby table, the tool slipped from her grip, clattering against the hard-packed earth. The laughter erupted, louder this time, unbridled and dismissive. "See?" someone jeered. "Told you she was useless." The sound of their derision hung in the hot air, thick with their collective arrogance. They saw a woman who embodied everything they were taught to overcome: weakness, instability, a lack of control. To them, she was an affront to their very existence, a civilian intrusion into their sacred space, seemingly incapable of the most basic task required of their profession. McKinney, emboldened by the general sentiment, stepped forward, his massive frame casting a long shadow over Celeste. "All right, lady," he drawled, his tone dripping with condescension. "What in the hell are you doing out here? This ain't no damn tea party." Celeste finally looked up, her gaze steady, locking onto McKinney's. There was no anger, no defensiveness in her eyes, only a quiet, unnerving resolve. "I'm here to demonstrate a prototype," she stated, her voice surprisingly clear, though still possessing a delicate tremor. "A solution for a problem many of you may one day face." More laughter. "A problem we face?" Another soldier chimed in. "The only problem we face is a soft target who can't hold her equipment." $1,000 bet was tossed into the mix. Sergeant First Class Braddock, a quiet but respected sniper, usually reserved, even joined in the banter, though his tone held less malice than the others. "I'll put $1,000 on her not even hitting the target board from 50 meters, he said, half joking. Another voice, higher pitched, full of youthful bravado, shot back, "If she hits anything, I'll burn my rifle." The air was thick with their dismissive arrogance, a palpable wall of skepticism. Colonel Kestrel, Shadow Viper's commanding officer, a man of stern demeanor and sharp intellect, finally arrived. He had been informed of Celeste's presence, but the details had been vague, frustratingly so. He watched the scene unfold, his jaw tightening. He respected his men's expertise, but this level of unprofessionalism was unacceptable. Still, a part of him shared their skepticism. He had seen the reports about Dr. Moreau. Brilliant, yes, a leading mind in neural interfaces, but a sniper. And with those tremors, it defied logic. "At ease, gentlemen." Kestrel's voice, though not a shout, cut through the jeers like a scalpel. The squad snapped to attention, their laughter instantly dying. Kestrel turned to Celeste, his expression unreadable. "Dr. Moreau," he began, his tone formal, a subtle warning woven into the civility. "While I understand your intentions, this is a live combat training environment. We cannot afford distractions or unproven methodologies." Celeste met his gaze, unflinching. "My methodology is proven, Colonel, and its relevance to this environment is precisely why I'm here. I believe I can demonstrate its effectiveness in a manner that leaves no doubt." Kestrel narrowed his eyes. "And how do you propose to do that, Doctor?" His voice was laced with a challenge, his posture daring her to impress him. Celeste paused, her gaze sweeping over the skeptical faces of the elite squad, her eyes lingering for a moment on McKinney, then on Wren. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. "I propose," she said, her voice gaining a surprising clarity, "to extinguish a candle from 2,685 meters, one shot, without touching the wax." A stunned silence fell over the range. The desert wind seemed to hold its breath. 2,685 meters. That was over a mile and a half, an almost impossible shot for even their most seasoned snipers on a good day, with perfect conditions and a static target. To extinguish a small flame without disturbing the candle itself from that distance with a single bullet, it was beyond ridiculous. It was a fantasy. McKinney burst out laughing again, a harsh, incredulous sound. "You're joking, right? You can't even hold a scope tool, and you think you can pull that off?" His comrades exchanged incredulous glances, some shaking their heads, others smirking. The challenge was so outrageous it felt like an insult. Colonel Kestrel's expression remained unreadable, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. He knew the parameters of such a shot, he knew the physics, he knew the immense skill required, and he knew the woman standing before him with her trembling hands appeared to possess none of it. Yet there was something in her eyes, a quiet certainty that made him hesitate. He decided to call her bluff. This would either be a spectacular failure that would send her packing or, well, he couldn't even imagine the or. "All right, Dr. Moreau," Kestrel said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "You have your challenge. Sergeant McKinney, set up the target, a standard paraffin candle, as requested, and make sure it's precisely 2,685 meters downrange. Wren, you'll oversee the target setup and verification. No tricks." McKinney, still grinning, saluted mockingly. "Yes, sir. Anything for the lady who thinks she can shoot like a ghost." He and Wren, along with a few other operators, began to prepare, the initial amusement slowly giving way to a grudging curiosity. They had never seen such a bold, seemingly impossible claim. Part of them, a very small part buried deep beneath their cynicism, wondered if there was some hidden method, some secret she possessed. As the team moved to prepare the range, Celeste walked calmly towards the heavy-duty rifle case she had brought. She knelt, her movements deliberate despite the persistent tremor, and began to unlatch it. Her quiet focus was a stark contrast to the buzzing skepticism of the Delta Force operators. They watched her, their earlier laughter now replaced by an expectant silence, a collective holding of breath. The stage was set. The impossible challenge had been issued, and a frail woman whose hands couldn't even hold a tool was about to attempt to rewrite the rules of what they thought was possible. The desert sun continued its relentless descent, casting long dramatic shadows across the range, as if in anticipation of the shot that would either confirm their mockery or shatter their understanding of precision. The desert air, still thick with the lingering dust of Part 1 Foot's mockery, now held a different kind of charge, anticipation. The Delta Force operators, their initial jeers having faded into a grudging silence, watched Dr. Celeste Moreau. Their skepticism hadn't vanished, but it had morphed into a morbid curiosity. They had witnessed countless feats of marksmanship, but never anything approaching the audacity of her stated intent. Extinguishing a candle from over 2.5 kilometers with a single untouched shot was not just difficult, it bordered on the realm of the mythical. Celeste, seemingly oblivious to the intense scrutiny, moved with a quiet, almost meditative focus. Her trembling hands, the very hands that had caused so much derision, now performed a complex ballet of precision. From the heavy-duty rifle case, she carefully extracted a disassembled long-range precision rifle. It wasn't a standard military issue. Its carbon fiber chassis gleamed, its barrel was unusually thick, fluted with intricate patterns, and the scope, a monstrosity of polished lenses and complex dials, seemed to hum with an internal life. With an almost reverent touch, she began to assemble it. Each component clicked into place with satisfying certainty, the receiver locking into the stock, the heavy barrel sliding into its housing, the bolt seating with a muffled thump. There was no hesitation, no fumbling, despite the persistent tremor that rippled through her forearms. It was as if her hands, while outwardly betraying a tremor, possessed an inherent muscle memory intelligence that bypassed the neurological interference. McKinney, a seasoned sniper himself, watched, his brow furrowed. He recognized the quality of the components, the careful craftsmanship. This was no ordinary rifle. Then came the centerpiece, the neural-assisted aiming prototype she called ChronoSight V7. Celeste unlatched a separate, smaller case and lifted out a sleek, almost futuristic device. It wasn't a conventional scope. While it had a large primary lens, its body was encrusted with intricate sensors and miniature holographic projectors. She smoothly attached it to the rifle's Picatinny rail, the magnetic clamps engaging with a soft thunk. A faint blue light pulsed from a small indicator on its side. "What in the blazes is that?" a young operator whispered, his eyes wide. Ren Ishikawa, ever observant, leaned closer. Her gaze was not on the rifle but on Celeste's movements, a quiet intensity. Ren had seen many things in her career, but never such a stark contradiction, profound physical vulnerability paired with absolute unyielding mental focus. Celeste ignored the murmurs. She moved behind the rifle, taking her position on the shooting mat. Her movements were fluid, practiced. She didn't settle in with the aggressive confidence of a military sniper about to unleash hell. Instead, she lowered herself with a gentle reverence, as if preparing for a delicate surgical procedure. Her cheek rested against the cool composite stock. One trembling hand went to the scope, adjusting the focus. The other settled on the grip, her index finger resting lightly on the trigger guard. Then she began to calibrate, and this was where the true astonishment began. Her eyes, magnified by the ChronoSight V7, seemed to pierce the very fabric of the desert air. She didn't just look through the scope, she interacted with it. Small, intricate holographic displays flickered within the lens, projecting an array of data points: wind speed and direction, temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, even the Coriolis effect for the Earth's rotation. These weren't mere readouts. They were live, dynamic visualizations that shifted and danced with the subtle changes in the environment. Her head tilted slightly, almost imperceptibly, as if listening to an inaudible symphony of data. Her trembling fingers, once so clumsy with the scope tool, now danced over the ChronoSight's integrated controls, making micro-adjustments with shocking precision. It was a complex ballet of human and machine, her will translating through the interface to refine the ballistic calculations. She's compensating for everything, McKinney breathed, his earlier mockery completely gone, replaced by genuine awe. Every single variable. Look at the data feed from that scope. It's insane. Colonel Kestrel, who had approached quietly, stood beside McKinney, his arms crossed. His stern face was etched with a mixture of disbelief and grudging respect. He had seen advanced targeting systems, but this was beyond anything he had encountered. The seamless, intuitive interaction between the shooter and the technology was revolutionary. As Celeste continued her calibration, a chilling thought began to take root in Ren's mind. The way Celeste moved, the way she handled the rifle, the almost unnatural calm in her eyes despite the tremors. It wasn't the movement of a scientist handling equipment, it was the movement of a sniper, a very, very good one. Then a classified memory surfaced in Ren's sharp mind, a fleeting, almost mythical tale whispered only among the highest echelons of special operations. A ghost story almost. About a rescue mission in Yemen years ago. 6 hostages, trapped in a compound, shielded by dual layers of reinforced ballistic glass. No direct line of sight, one shot through both barriers, ricocheting precisely off a support beam to neutralize a single critical threat holding the hostages at gunpoint. It was deemed impossible, never officially acknowledged, a classified feat so audacious it became legend, and the details, so sparse, always ended with the same vague reference: the ghost sniper. Wren's eyes snapped to Celeste's arm, where a faint, almost invisible scar pattern snaked beneath her sleeve. It was a series of tiny, perfectly aligned punctures, arranged in a specific, forbidden sequence. Code for Obsidian Echo, a classified project. A legend whispered about within the shadows, and suddenly the pieces began to click into place. It couldn't be. Celeste finally paused, her breathing deep and even, almost imperceptible. She took one last, long look through the scope. The internal holographic reticle steady, seemingly unaffected by the tremors that still subtly shook her body. The ChronoSight V7 was not eliminating the tremor, it was compensating for it, predicting its micro-fluctuations and adjusting the point of aim instantaneously, a dance between human imperfection and technological brilliance. Target confirmed, a voice crackled over the radio from the 2,685-meter mark, where Wren and McKinney had set up the candle, verified by laser rangefinder. Wind conditions stable. Celeste took a final breath, holding it. Her finger, trembling just slightly, settled on the trigger. There was a moment of absolute profound silence on the range, a stillness so intense it seemed to suck the very air from their lungs. Every eye was fixed on Celeste, on the rifle, on the impossible distance. The shot echoed across the vast desert expanse, a singular precise crack. 7 seconds, 7 incredibly long seconds crawled by. The Delta Force operators held their breath, their bodies rigid. 7 seconds was the calculated flight time for a bullet over that immense distance. Then over the radio, Wren's voice, usually so composed, came through, laced with pure, unadulterated shock. "Colonel, it's gone, the flame, it's extinguished, the candle, it's untouched, my God, silence." Profound, absolute, deafening silence, the kind that follows a miracle. The jaws of 12 elite shooters dropped in unison. McKinney's eyes were wide, unblinking, his earlier mockery vaporized by a tidal wave of disbelief. He looked at Kestrel, then back at Celeste, then back at Kestrel, as if seeking confirmation that his eyes weren't playing tricks on him. The $1,000 bet, the joke about burning a rifle, it all seemed grotesquely insignificant now. Celeste slowly lowered her rifle, the faint blue light of the ChronoSight V7 still pulsing. She stood, her movements still quiet, her eyes meeting the stunned gazes of the Delta Force operators. There was no triumph in her expression, no arrogance, only a quiet understanding. Colonel Kestrel walked towards her, his face a mask of awe. He stopped directly in front of her, his voice a low, reverent whisper. Who are you?" Celeste's eyes held his. Her shoulders straightened, almost imperceptibly. "Lieutenant Colonel Celeste Moreau," she stated, her voice clear and steady, devoid of any tremor now, the authority in her tone resonating with a power they had not expected. "Retired Delta Force sniper." A collective gasp rippled through the squad. Retired Delta Force sniper. The name, the rank, the unit. It hit them like a physical blow. They had mocked a ghost, a legend. Wren, her heart pounding, stepped forward, her gaze fixed on the scar pattern on Celeste's arm, the series of perfectly aligned pinpricks, almost like a microcircuit etched onto her skin. She had only ever seen photos, highly classified files, rumors. "Obsidian Echo," Wren whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's real." Celeste met Wren's gaze, a flicker of something akin to recognition passing between them. A silent acknowledgement of shared knowledge, of hidden truths. McKinney, still reeling, looked at the ground, then back at Celeste. His face was pale, a mixture of shame and utter astonishment. He had stood there, deriding a woman who had just performed a feat that defied the very laws of marksmanship as they knew them. The words of his earlier scoffing echoed in his mind, "If she hits anything, I'll burn my rifle." The weight of his bravado crushed him. Slowly, deliberately, he moved to attention. His right hand, still stained with desert dust, rose to his temple. He rendered a slow, respectful salute. One by one, the other operators followed, their faces a tableau of profound humility. The silence was no longer one of skeptical anticipation, but of deep, unreserved respect. The desert wind still blew, but the air no longer carried the sting of mockery. It hummed with the quiet acknowledgement of a living legend, a woman whose trembling hands had just shattered their preconceived notions of strength, precision, and the limits of human capability. The shot had not just extinguished a flame, it had ignited a new understanding. The salutes were slow, deliberate, each one a silent apology, a grudging admission of profound misjudgment. Sergeant Lars McKinney held his hand rigidly at his temple, his eyes fixed on Lieutenant Colonel Celeste Moreau. The weight of his earlier contempt settled heavily in his gut, a sour, unfamiliar taste. He had been loud, boorish, and utterly wrong. The others, too, stood at attention, their postures stiff, their faces stripped bare of arrogance, revealing a mix of shock, respect, and a nascent curiosity. The desert, which had moments ago seemed to amplify their derision, now bore witness to their collective humbling silence. Colonel Kestrel, his own initial skepticism shattered, stepped forward. His expression had shifted from stern scrutiny to a profound, almost reverent respect. He looked at Celeste, then at his stunned squad, and finally back at Celeste, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. He cleared his throat, his voice regaining its command presence, though tinged with an unusual solemnity. "At ease," Kestrel commanded, his gaze sweeping over his men. They dropped their salutes, but the tension in the air remained, a palpable echo of the impossible shot they had just witnessed. "Gentlemen, allow me to formally introduce Lieutenant Colonel Celeste Moreau, retired Delta Force sniper." His voice carried the weight of her rank, a title that resonated with unshakable authority among their elite fraternity. He paused, letting the significance sink in. "Some of you may have heard whispers, legends, perhaps. Know this, Lieutenant Colonel Moreau was, and clearly still is, one of the most gifted snipers this unit has ever produced. Her operational record is extensive, classified, and beyond reproach." He looked directly at McKinney, a subtle message in his eyes. "The shot you just witnessed, it is merely a fraction of her capabilities." A ripple of murmurs went through the squad. One of them, a Delta Force ghost, returned. The shame of their initial behavior deepened. Kestrel continued, his voice softer now, explaining the untold chapter of Celeste's story. "During Operation Rabbit, a covert mission deep in hostile territory, Lieutenant Colonel Moreau was exposed to a potent neurotoxin. The incident was classified, its effects devastating." He paused, his gaze falling to Celeste's still trembling hands. "The neurotoxin caused permanent neurological damage, resulting in the tremors you witnessed. Her active duty career as a sniper was deemed over." A collective intake of breath. The truth was far more complex, more tragic than they could have imagined. They had seen weakness, but it was the aftermath of a hidden wound, a sacrifice made in the line of duty. However, Kestrel's voice rose, carrying a new note of pride. "Lieutenant Colonel Moreau is not one to be defeated." Instead of succumbing to her injuries, instead of giving up the fight, she channeled her formidable intellect and unwavering spirit into a new mission. She chose to adapt, to innovate, to find a way for soldiers like herself, soldiers whose careers might be cut short by tremors, by PTSD, by neurological damage, to continue to serve. The technology you just saw, the ChronoSight V7, is the culmination of her relentless dedication. His words hung in the air, transforming their perception of Celeste from a frail civilian to a visionary warrior. She hadn't just overcome her disability, she had harnessed it, turned it into a catalyst for revolutionary change. McKinney, still visibly shaken, shifted his weight. He had been so quick to judge, so blind to the invisible battles others might be fighting. The irony was a bitter pill. For months he had been privately battling a secret of his own, a creeping dread that whispered of a similar fate. Early onset tremors, subtle, almost imperceptible to others, but devastatingly real to him, a sniper whose very livelihood depended on absolute stillness. He dismissed it as fatigue, as stress, but the fear had grown, a cold knot in his stomach. Watching Celeste, seeing her hands, then witnessing her impossible shot, it was a mirror reflecting his own deepest fears, and unexpectedly a glimmer of hope. He looked at Celeste again, really looked at her this time, not as the frail woman he'd mocked, but as a pathfinder, a survivor who had turned her personal tragedy into a solution for others. A new thought blossomed in his mind, audacious and terrifying. "Colonel Kestrel," McKinney's voice cut through the lingering silence, rough but steady. "Sir, I'd like to volunteer." Kestrel turned, surprised. "Volunteer for what, Sergeant?" McKinney swallowed, his gaze flicking to Celeste, then back to Kestrel. "To try the prototype, sir. The ChronoSight V7. He paused, then added in a lower voice, barely audible, I've been experiencing some instability. In my hands. Not like hers, sir, not yet. But it's there." He didn't elaborate, but the unspoken admission hung heavy in the air. The tough as nails, outwardly mocking McKinney, admitting to a weakness, seeking help. It was a profound moment. A wave of surprise rippled through the squad. McKinney, of all people. The man who scoffed at perceived weakness, his confession was an act of raw courage. Celeste, who had remained silent throughout Kestrel's explanation, finally spoke, her voice soft. "Sergeant McKinney," she said, her eyes gentle, acknowledging his vulnerability without judgment. "It would be an honor." The transformation on McKinney's face was stark, the shame lifted, replaced by a tentative hope, a flicker of gratitude. He nodded, a silent bond forming between him and the woman he had so grievously misjudged. One by one, other soldiers began to murmur, then to step forward. Not all of them admitted to personal issues like McKinney. Some were simply driven by genuine respect and an eagerness to understand this revolutionary technology. Others, perhaps, were contemplating their own future, the inevitable wear and tear of a life in combat, the hidden injuries that might one day surface. "I'd like to try too, Lieutenant Colonel," Specialist Ren Ishikawa said, her voice firm. Her sharp mind had already processed the implications of ChronoSight V7, not just for damaged soldiers, but for enhancing the capabilities of all snipers. She saw the potential for a new era of precision. "Me too, ma'am. And me. Can I get in line, Lieutenant Colonel?" The line of skepticism had dissolved, replaced by a queue of eager volunteers. The initial mockery had been utterly obliterated by Celeste's skill and Kestrel's explanation. Respect wasn't just growing, it was blossoming, deep and genuine. They saw not a broken soldier, but a pioneer, not weakness, but adaptation. Over the next few days, Fort Ridgeback became a different kind of training ground, under Celeste's quiet guidance, and with Kestrel's full support, members of Shadow Viper began to train with the ChronoSight V7. Celeste was a patient and meticulous instructor. She didn't just teach them how to use the technology, she taught them to think differently. The ChronoSight wasn't a crutch, it was an extension. A sophisticated lens that allowed the shooter to perceive and interact with ballistic data in an entirely new way. She explained the neural interface, how it subtly read the micro-movements of the optic nerve and integrated them with the rifle's gyroscopes and sensors. It didn't eliminate the human element, It enhanced it, refining natural aim, compensating for human imperfection, whether it was a deliberate twitch or an uncontrollable tremor. McKinney was among the most dedicated. Initially, his hands trembled almost imperceptibly as he sighted targets, but with Celeste's guidance and the ChronoSight's feedback, he began to see his own tremors not as a failure, but as another variable the system could account for. He learned to trust the holographic reticle, which showed the true point of impact despite his physical instability. He learned to relax into the system, allowing the technology to harmonize with his intent. The frustration he had felt for months began to dissipate, replaced by a renewed sense of control. His shots, once beginning to stray, found their mark with increasing consistency. Ren, with her innate precision, found the ChronoSight V7 unlocked new levels of accuracy. She could account for variables she hadn't even consciously processed before, making her an even more lethal force. She spent hours discussing the underlying principles with Celeste, her keen intellect devouring every piece of information. She saw the military applications, the potential to reduce collateral damage, to increase mission success in critical scenarios. The $1,000 bet and the burn my rifle jokes became distant, embarrassing memories. The soldier who had made the rifle joke actually approached Celeste with a genuine apology, offering to clean her rifle every day for a week. She simply smiled, a rare, gentle expression, and declined. The respect for Celeste was no longer grudging, it was profound. They saw her not as Dr. Moreau, the civilian scientist, but as Lieutenant Colonel Celeste Moreau, a warrior who had fought her own battle, developed her own weapon, and returned to share it with her brothers and sisters in arms. They saw a living embodiment of adaptability, of turning weakness into strength. The narrative around Celeste shifted entirely. She wasn't an outsider, she was a returning hero, albeit one with an extraordinary, painful story. The whispers now were of awe, of gratitude. She had brought hope to those who thought their careers, their purpose, might be lost to unseen enemies within their own bodies. Days bled into a week, then 2. The Fort Ridgeback Range, once a place of exclusive traditional marksmanship, became a laboratory of innovation. The rhythmic thwack of rounds hitting targets was now accompanied by the faint, almost silent hum of the ChronoSight V7, a new kind of precision echoing across the desert. Celeste, once reviled, was now revered, her quiet presence commanding more respect than any shouted order. She had shown them that adaptation was not weakness, but the ultimate form of strength, a necessary evolution in a world where new threats could strike not just from without, but from within. The initial humiliation had paved the way for a revolutionary shift in their understanding, forging a bond of respect that went deeper than any rank or commendation. The Shadow Viper operators, once mocking, were now becoming disciples of her adaptive philosophy, ready to face whatever the future and Dr. Nazim Khoury might throw at them. They didn't know it yet, but Celeste's innovation, born from her own suffering, would soon be tested in a crucible far more dangerous than any training exercise. Toi xin loa! Toi tuk su xin loi vi da bo so chi tiet quan trong do. Loi này là đầu tôi không do khi huống đan qua ban. Tôi đã chỉnh sửa lại part 4, The Ghost That Poisoned Her Returns, để loại bỏ tất cả các chú thích trong ngoặc đơn, bao gồm cả chú thích âm thanh và hướng dẫn về giọng điệu hành động. Đây là bản nháp đã sửa của part 4, vui lòng kiểm tra lại lần nữa và tôi cam kết sẽ cẩn thận hơn rất nhiều trong các phần tiếp theo. Vui lòng. Part 4. The Ghost That Poisoned Her Returns. The atmosphere at Fort Ridgeback had undergone a seismic shift. The initial scorn had been replaced by a profound, almost reverent respect. Days had turned into weeks, and Celeste Moreau, once an unwelcome intruder, had become an indispensable asset. Her ChronoSight V7 technology wasn't just a prototype, it was a revelation, transforming the capabilities of the Shadow Viper operators. McKinney, in particular, thrived under her guidance, his subtle tremors no longer a source of secret dread, but a variable the ChronoSight seamlessly managed. His confidence had returned, his shots finding their mark with an almost unnerving consistency. Ren, too, had pushed the boundaries of her own precision, achieving targets previously thought impossible, but the relative calm of the training grounds was about to be shattered. Colonel Kestrel's voice, usually a steady barometer of control, held a new, chilling edge as he addressed Shadow Viper in the briefing room. The large tactical map projected onto the wall behind him showed a desolate, mountainous region in North Africa. This was not a training exercise. This was the real world, bleeding into their carefully constructed sanctuary. "All right, listen up," Kestrel began, his gaze sweeping across the faces of his elite operators. "Intel has confirmed a new, highly disturbing development. Our ghost has resurfaced, a collective ripple of tension. The ghost was a known entity in the classified world, a shadow figure responsible for some of the most insidious threats." Dr. Nazim Khoury, Kestrel continued, the name delivered with a palpable weight of disdain, a grainy, almost spectral image of a man with cold, calculating eyes appeared on the screen. "Some of you may recognize the name. Khoury is a brilliant but utterly deranged chemist, a former bioweapons specialist believed dead after a facility strike years ago. Apparently, he's more resilient than we gave him credit for." Celeste, seated at the back of the room, stiffened imperceptibly at the mention of Khoury's name. A cold dread, familiar and unwelcome, slithered into her gut. Nazim Khoury, the architect of her personal nightmare, the man responsible for the neurotoxin that had stolen her career, leaving her with the persistent tremors she fought every waking moment. His reappearance wasn't just a threat, it was a personal affront, a ghost from her past reaching out to reclaim its pound of flesh. Kestrel's voice hardened. "Khoury is now operating out of a remote, fortified compound in the Atlas Mountains. He's not just back, he's evolving. Our intelligence indicates he has developed a deadlier variant of the neurotoxin he was famous for, a variant that is more potent, faster acting, and, most terrifyingly, designed for epidermal absorption. Meaning, direct skin contact is enough to expose you. Biofilters, standard hazmat protocols, they're largely ineffective against this new strain." A murmur of alarm went through the room. Delta Force operators were trained for every conceivable threat, but a rapidly absorbed neurotoxin that bypassed standard defenses was a game-changer. It instilled a new kind of fear, one that bypassed armor and skill, striking directly at the nervous system. "His target, we believe, is not just destabilization," Kestrel explained, gesturing to the compound layout on the screen. "We have reason to suspect he's attempting to perfect a delivery system for mass casualties, potentially targeting high-value civilian populations or critical infrastructure. This is a level 0 threat." Kestrel's eyes met Celeste's across the room. And Dr. Moreau's experience with Khoury's work, unfortunately, makes her uniquely qualified to assist in this operation. She will be joining the OP as TOC commander. The announcement surprised no one. Celeste's knowledge of Khoury's previous neurotoxin, her direct personal experience with its effects, made her an invaluable asset. She had literally lived with his creation. She possessed an intimate understanding of its insidious nature that no intelligence brief could convey. The following hours were a whirlwind of preparation. Gear checks, mission planning, intel reviews. Celeste moved with a quiet efficiency, her presence a calming, focused anchor amidst the rising tension. She wasn't just a scientist anymore, she was a returning warfighter. As she geared up, she retrieved her old combat kit from storage. The familiar weight of the assault pack, the worn feel of her tactical vest, the comforting coolness of her old sidearm, it all felt like a second skin. It had been years since she wore her full combat gear, since she prepared for a direct action mission. But the muscle memory was still there, dormant but ready. Ren watched her, a look of quiet admiration on her face. "You're really going, Lieutenant Colonel," she said, stating the obvious. Celeste looked up, her expression resolute. "Curry is a threat that needs to be neutralized, and this time I understand his weapon better than anyone." She paused, then added, a steely glint in her eyes. "He put me out of the fight once. He won't get a second chance to hurt my people." McKinney, fully kitted out, approached her, his face grim. "We've got your six, Lieutenant Colonel, every step of the way." His words held genuine sincerity, a complete reversal from their first encounter. He trusted her implicitly now, not just as a brilliant mind, but as a leader. The deployment was swift and clandestine. A specialized transport aircraft, cloaked by the night, carried Shadow Viper deep into North African airspace. The approach to the compound was arduous, a multi-hour trek through rugged, unforgiving terrain. The air was thin, cold, and carried the scent of dry earth and distant scrub. They moved like ghosts, their night vision goggles painting the landscape in an eerie green, their movements silent, coordinated, practiced. The compound itself was a labyrinth of reinforced concrete and hidden entry points, nestled into a natural rock formation. Intel had provided a detailed layout, but the reality on the ground was always more complex, more dangerous. "All right, team," Kestrel's voice was a low whisper over their comms. "Entry point Beta -2 confirmed clear. McKinney, Ishikawa, lead the breach. Celeste, you'll be holding TOC command from the initial secure position, maintaining comms and providing real-time intelligence overlay. We go in on my mark." The plan was textbook, a rapid surgical strike to neutralize Corey, secure his research, and extract before he could activate any contingency plans or disseminate his deadly creations. The breach was executed with textbook precision, a controlled explosion, a silent entry through the newly formed opening. Shadow Viper moved like a well-oiled machine, flowing through the corridors, clearing rooms with practiced efficiency. The compound was eerily quiet, almost too quiet. No alarms, no immediate resistance. A chilling sign. They reached a central research wing, a complex of laboratories filled with humming equipment, bubbling vats, and an array of terrifying scientific apparatus. The air here was strangely still, devoid of the natural ventilation they expected. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, a faint, acrid scent, barely noticeable above the metallic tang of the lab. Then, a shimmering, almost invisible mist began to emanate from small, hidden vents in the floor and ceiling. It wasn't an explosive gas, no thick cloud. It was a fine, almost translucent aerosol, clinging to the air, settling on surfaces. "Gas!" someone yelled, but it was already too late. The biofilters in their helmets, designed for conventional airborne threats, offered scant protection against this new variant. It wasn't meant to be inhaled, it was designed to be absorbed through exposed skin, through the minuscule pores of their gloves, through the gaps in their tactical gear. Ren was the first to feel it. A subtle itching on her forearms, then a prickling sensation that quickly spread. Her vision blurred for a fraction of a second, her muscles twitching involuntarily. "Contact! Direct contact!" she gasped, her voice strained. "It's absorbing through the skin!" McKinney stumbled, his foot catching on a discarded piece of equipment. He recovered quickly, but his hands, normally steady, now showed a distinct violent tremor. His rifle wavered. "Damn it! My hands! They're shaking!" he gritted out, his voice laced with shock and a growing terror. The subtle tremors he had fought to control, the ones Celeste's tech had managed, were now raging, unchecked. One by one, the elite squad began to succumb. A sniper, his finger freezing on the trigger, unable to pull it, A breech man, his powerful grip on his shotgun suddenly weakening, the weapon almost slipping from his grasp. Their movements became jerky, uncoordinated. Fine motor control, the very essence of their precision, began to unravel. Their eyes darted wildly, their faces contorted with a horrifying realization. Just like Celeste, years ago, the same insidious, debilitating tremor, Curry's signature. Neurotoxin! It's the neurotoxin! Kestrel's voice roared over the comms, filled with an icy fury. Pull back, immediate extraction. All teams fall back. But falling back wasn't simple. The tremors made every movement a struggle. Their vision swam, their balance faltered. The elite unit, designed for surgical precision, was rapidly being reduced to a collection of trembling, vulnerable bodies. Fear, cold and insidious, began to creep into their minds, not just of physical incapacitation, but of losing the very control that defined them. Celeste, monitoring the situation from her secure TOC position 100 meters away, watched the chaotic feed from their body cameras, listened to their ragged breaths and desperate reports. Her heart hammered against her ribs. No, not again. She saw McKinney's struggling hands, Wren's contorted face. She felt a surge of familiar, terrifying phantom tremors through her own limbs, a vivid echo of the day Corey's original creation had invaded her own body. Her mind, however, remained razor-sharp. Curry had designed this new variant for rapid incapacitation, to prevent any counteraction. But she knew its father, she knew its family, and she knew its weaknesses. The question wasn't if they were poisoned, it was how long they had before the damage became permanent. "Colonel!" Celeste's voice cut through the comms, sharper and more urgent than they had ever heard it. The neurotoxin is designed for quick onset, rapid neural disruption, but it also has a delayed secondary effect, permanent damage if exposure is prolonged. You need to get them out, now. Forget the intel, Colonel. Get them out before it's too late. Kestrel, struggling with his own growing symptoms, tried to issue commands, but his voice was slurring. Extract! Extract! Fall back to... His words dissolved into a cough, his breath ragged. The team was trapped, their bodies betraying them, their mission collapsing around them. The ghost that poisoned Celeste had returned, and this time it was consuming her team, threatening to steal their control, their careers, their very identities, just as it had once tried to steal hers. The battle for the compound had just begun, but the real fight, the race against nerve failure, was already underway, and only Celeste, the woman who knew Corey's poison intimately, had any hope of stopping it. The secure TOC position, a temporary nerve center carved out of the rugged North African landscape, crackled with the desperate urgency of the Shadow Viper's implosion. Celeste Moreau, her face illuminated by the stark glow of multiple tactical screens, felt the familiar, chilling tendrils of panic threatening to take root. It was a sensation she had fought for years, a ghost of her own past, but now it was compounded by the horrifying reality playing out before her. Her team, her new family, was falling victim to the very poison that had crippled her. On the main display, McKinney's body camera feed lurched violently, his labored breathing echoing through her comms. His hands gripping his rifle convulsed uncontrollably. Ren Ishikawa's feed showed her struggling to maintain balance, her movements jerky and uncoordinated as she tried to pull a dazed teammate to cover. Colonel Kestrel's voice, once so commanding, was now a garbled mix of commands and gasps. Their elite precision, their honed reactions, were dissolving into a chaotic tableau of incapacitation. Forget intel, forget Curry. Mission priorities shifted instantly, violently. Her team, her people. Get them out alive. That was the only objective now. Celeste's fingers, despite their own latent tremor, flew across the holographic interface of her command console. Her mind, however, was a whirlwind of calculations, accessing every piece of data she possessed on Corey's neurotoxin. The original strain had been designed for delayed, insidious effects, a slow erosion of control. This new variant, however, was aggressive, designed to paralyze a fighting force within minutes. But if it was faster, it might also have a more limited window for permanent damage, a point of no return she desperately needed to pinpoint. "Status report!" Celeste barked into her mic, her voice cutting through the comms chaos with surprising clarity and authority. "All teams, immediate disengagement. Break contact and move to Extraction Point Alpha. Do not engage Corey. Your lives are the only objective." She could hear their struggle, the slurred replies, the heavy thuds of equipment being dropped. Can't move," McKinney gasped, his voice tight with frustration and fear. "My legs. They're giving out. Wren, assist McKinney. Provide covering fire as best you can." Celeste commanded, already overriding the standard tactical display with a live biometric feed she was pulling from their suit sensors. Heart rate spiked, neural activity flared erratically, muscle spasms registered across the board. The neurotoxin was attacking their peripheral nervous systems with brutal efficiency. There was no time for traditional medical protocols. Standard antidotes were hours away, assuming they even worked against this new variant. But Celeste had something else, something born of her own suffering, the ChronoSight V7. It wasn't just an aiming system, it was a sophisticated neural interface designed to interact with the nervous system, to compensate for its imperfections. Could it be repurposed? Could it offer more than just precision? Could it offer resilience? Her mind raced, connecting theoretical dots, recalling suppressed DARPA research papers, cross-referencing Corey's known biochemical pathways. The ChronoSight V7 worked by predicting and compensating for neural signals. What if it could also stabilize them? What if it could act as a temporary neural brace, buying critical time? "Colonel Kestrel, listen to me." Celeste's voice was urgent, piercing through his haze. "You need to get your ChronoSight units to your men, now. Activate the Adaptive Neurostabilization Protocol. It's an experimental feature, but it's their only chance." There was a moment of silence. Kestrel, dazed and disoriented, struggled to comprehend. Neurostabilization. How? How do we activate it? "It's integrated. Push the secondary activation button on the scope. 3 quick presses. It will reroute the ChronoSight's processing power from aiming assistance to neural mapping and stabilization," Celeste explained rapidly, her words precise, even as the images on screen showed the team's rapid decline. "It won't cure you. It will only buy you time. It will dampen the symptoms, give you enough control to move, to fight your way out." She watched, her breath hitched, as Kestrel fumbled with his own ChronoSight. His trembling fingers struggled with the small button. Finally, a faint, almost inaudible twirr of internal mechanisms, and a green light on his scope pulsed, followed by a sudden jarring jolt through his body. He gasped, his eyes wide. "It's working. It's dampening it." Kestrel's voice was clearer, though still strained. The violent shaking in his hands lessened, reducing to the familiar, subtle tremor Celeste lived with. He could breathe, could think, could move with more deliberation. "Spread the word. Assist your teammates in activating it," Celeste ordered, her gaze fixed on the body cam feeds. She saw Wren, with renewed, albeit still shaky, resolve, reaching for McKinney's ChronoSight. His tremors were still severe, but with Wren's help they activated his unit. Another jolt, a gasp from McKinney. I can move. It's not gone, but I can function," McKinney exclaimed, a surge of desperate hope in his voice. He could slowly, painfully bring his rifle back up. His movements were still far from perfect, but they were no longer completely incapacitated. The compound, once a death trap, became a desperate, trembling retreat. Shadow Viper, now moving with an eerie unified shakiness, began to extract. They weren't the surgical precision unit of before, but they were moving, they were fighting, they were surviving. The battle raged, a terrifying dance between Curry's insidious poison and Celeste's desperate improvisation. They engaged Curry's loyalists, who emerged from the shadows confident in the neurotoxin's incapacitating effects. But they hadn't counted on Celeste's countermeasure. The Shadow Viper operators, though still impaired, could fight back, their ChronoSight units vibrating with the effort of dampening the neurotoxin's effects. Mid-retreat, a figure emerged from a hidden passageway, cloaked in a dark, form-fitting suit, his face obscured by a translucent visor. Dr. Nazim Khoury. His voice, modulated by a speaker, was cold, devoid of emotion, a chilling echo through the comms. "Amateurish," Khoury's voice hissed, directed at Celeste. "Your pathetic attempts at a countermeasure are nothing more than a temporary reprieve. There is no cure for what I have unleashed. Your pathetic little toys are merely delaying the inevitable. Your nervous systems will collapse permanently." Celeste's hand tightened on her console. Her personal nemesis, now gloating over the near destruction of her team. The familiar scar on her arm, the series of tiny, perfectly aligned punctures that Wren had recognized, throbbed with a phantom ache. This was not just a wound, not just a scar from a past injury. This was an experimental neural interface implant, a relic from a banned DARPA trial. A project so controversial it had been sealed away. She had volunteered for it. A desperate gamble to regain control after Khoury's first attack. A secret she had buried deep. The ChronoSight V7, the neural-assisted aiming prototype, was built on the very principles she had endured from that trial, refined and perfected. It was not just her adaptive tech, it was a part of her, literally. "I'm not looking for a cure, Khoury," Celeste fired back, her voice echoing through the comms, resonating with a steel they had never heard. "I'm building resilience. I'm building a future where your poison cannot destroy us. You tried to break me, but you only made me stronger. And now I'm going to use that strength to save my team from you." Her words hit Khoury with the force of a physical blow. His cold, calculating facade flickered, a hint of genuine surprise crossing his face. He had expected despair, collapse. Not defiance, not this renewed, unyielding strength. The extraction was a brutal fight. The ChronoSight stabilization protocol was a desperate stopgap, not a cure. The operators fought through waves of nausea, disorientation, and weakening limbs, but the ability to function, even with tremors, was the difference between life and death. McKinney, his rifle still shaking, managed to lay down accurate suppression fire, covering the retreat. Wren, moving with a staggering determination, dragged a severely affected comm specialist towards the exit. Khoury, realizing his target was escaping, screamed orders at his remaining forces, but it was too late. Shadow Viper, battered but unbroken, stumbled out of the compound and into the waiting transport. Their bodies racked by the lingering effects of the toxin, but their lives saved by Celeste's ingenuity. Back on the transport, as the medical team began to administer what preliminary treatments they could, Celeste knelt beside McKinney. His face was pale, slick with sweat, but his eyes, though tired, held a fierce gratitude. "You saved us, Lieutenant Colonel," he whispered, his voice hoarse. You knew." Celeste simply nodded, her hand resting briefly on his shoulder. The fight wasn't over. The neurostabilization was temporary. They were out of Khoury's immediate grasp. But the race against permanent nerve failure had just begun. And only Celeste, with her intimate knowledge of the poison and the secret of her own experimental implant, stood between her team and a lifetime of debilitating tremors. The cost of her survival, the secret of Obsidian Echo, was now the key to theirs. The medical bays at Fort Ridgeback, normally bustling with the controlled chaos of active duty injuries, now hummed with a different, more profound sense of purpose. The Shadow Viper operators, their bodies still wrestling with the lingering after-effects of Dr. Nazim Khouri's neurotoxin, were under the tireless watch of an elite medical team. But the true architect of their recovery, the silent force guiding their path back from the brink, was Lieutenant Colonel Celeste Moreau. Her intimate, almost visceral understanding of Khouri's poison, coupled with the revolutionary capabilities of her ChronoSight V7 and the deep, buried secret of her own experimental obsidian echo neural implant, had allowed her to perform what doctors could only describe as a medical miracle. The stabilization protocol she had rapidly deployed during the North African extraction wasn't a cure, no, but it was a bridge, a vital lifeline that had pulled them back from the precipice of permanent, debilitating nerve failure. It had bought them invaluable time, dampening the immediate, incapacitating effects of the toxin and preventing the irreversible neurological collapse that Khouri had so maliciously intended. Weeks had passed since that harrowing mission. The violent convulsions that had seized the elite Delta Force operators had gradually receded, giving way to a persistent, subtle trembling, an unsettling echo of Celeste's own long-standing condition. They were no longer entirely incapacitated. They could move, think, and even aim, but their once unwavering precision, their hallmark of elite soldiering, was undeniably compromised. For warriors whose lives depended on absolute stillness, on split-second, pinpoint accuracy, this lingering instability was a professional death sentence, a threat to their very identities as the best of the best. Their careers, forged in countless crucible moments, hung precariously in the balance. The gravity of the situation had not gone unnoticed by the highest echelons of military leadership. A critical demonstration had been arranged, a singular event designed to showcase the capabilities of Celeste's technology and, more importantly, the resilience it offered. Pentagon brass, their faces etched with a mix of curiosity, skepticism, and a desperate, strategic hope, had descended upon Fort Ridgeback. They were acutely aware of the Khouri incident, the near-catastrophic incapacitation of a top-tier special operations unit, and the subsequent, almost miraculous stabilization that had pulled them back from the abyss. This wasn't merely about a new piece of gear. It was about the very future of soldier resilience, about the capacity to adapt and fight in a new era of biological warfare. Colonel Kestrel, his own hands now bearing a manageable, almost imperceptible tremor, stood resolutely beside Celeste. His stern countenance had softened over the weeks, his initial professional skepticism having long since dissolved, replaced by an unwavering trust and a profound admiration for the woman who had not only saved his team but had also redefined his understanding of strength. The Fort Ridgeback Range, an expanse of sun-baked earth and distant target stands, was once again the stage. It was the same range where Celeste had first shattered their perceptions, where laughter had given way to stunned silence. This time, however, the audience consisted not of mocking, jaded soldiers, but of high-ranking military officials, their gazes intense, their expressions a carefully guarded mix of doubt and strategic interest. The desert sun, impartial and relentless, beat down on the scene, casting long, stark shadows. Sergeant Lars McKinney, his formidable beard now neatly trimmed, his uniform crisp and unblemished, stepped onto the firing line. His bearing was resolute, almost defiant. The subtle, persistent tremor in his hands was still visible, a constant, undeniable reminder of the terrifying ordeal he and his teammates had endured in Khouri's compound. But his eyes, though tired, held a renewed fire, a quiet determination that spoke volumes. He picked up a standard-issue long-range rifle, now expertly fitted with Celeste's ChronoSight V7. He had spent countless grueling hours in the weeks following their return, training relentlessly with Celeste, pushing the boundaries of what was possible with the adaptive technology. He knew the deep-seated skepticism that lingered in the minds of the brass. He saw it reflected in their unblinking, analytical stares. But he also knew with every fiber of his being the profound and life-altering difference Celeste's invention had made in his own life, in the lives of his teammates, and potentially in the lives of countless other soldiers who might face similar unseen enemies. His target was a small, flickering candle set at 2,000 meters. This was not the truly impossible 2,685 meters that Celeste had conquered on that first day, but it was still an extraordinary distance. A true test of skill, especially for a sniper whose hands now carried an internal, persistent earthquake. It was a distance that would have been insurmountable for him just weeks ago, condemning him to a forced medical retirement. McKinney settled into position, his movements practiced, deliberate, his focus intense, almost absolute. He adjusted the ChronoSight, watching the intricate holographic reticle dance and shift within the scope, precisely compensating for the subtle, involuntary movements of his hands. He inhaled slowly, deeply, then exhaled with controlled precision and squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked, a sharp, concise report that echoed across the vast, silent range. The weight was tense, palpable, a collective holding of breath from every observer. Then, a voice crackled over the radio from the 2,000-meter target position, clear and authoritative. Target hit! Flame extinguished. A ripple of murmurs, then hushed whispers, went through the assembled Pentagon brass. It wasn't a perfect shot, perhaps not as surgically clean or as visually dramatic as Celeste's initial legendary feat, but it was devastatingly effective. McKinney slowly lowered his rifle, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. He hadn't just hit a target, he had hit back. He had struck a blow against the poison that had tried to break him, against the fear that had threatened to end his career. He had proven, undeniably, that precision could exist alongside imperfection, that a soldier's will could transcend physical limitation. The applause from the brass was hesitant at first. A ripple of polite clapping then grew, swelling into a genuine, robust acknowledgement of the ChronoSight's profound, life-altering impact. It was a powerful demonstration, not of absolute, flawless perfection, but of powerful, revolutionary resilience. Then, the moment everyone had anticipated, the true climax of the demonstration. Lieutenant Colonel Celeste Moreau stepped forward. She didn't pick up a ChronoSight-equipped rifle from the rack this time. Instead, she carried her own personal long-range rifle, the very same custom-built weapon she had wielded on that first impossible day. The one whose integrated ChronoSight V7 was not just a piece of technology, but an extension of her own being, specifically tailored to her unique neural signature, honed by the very implant that had been her closely guarded secret, her unique path to defiance. Her hands, as always, trembled, a constant visible testament to the unseen battle she fought daily. She positioned herself at the 2,685-meter mark, the exact audacious distance that had once seemed utterly ludicrous to the skeptical Delta Force operators. The original candle, pristine and symbolic, was brought out with meticulous care and placed upon the target stand. This was not merely a test for the brass, it was a profound testament, a silent, powerful statement, a closing of a painful, yet ultimately triumphant, circle. Celeste settled into her firing position, her movements fluid, almost graceful, an embodiment of practiced discipline despite the persistent visible tremor. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, taking a deep, calming breath, centering herself against the vastness of the desert and the weight of expectation. This shot was not just for demonstration, not just for the Pentagon brass. It was for every soldier who had ever felt their body betray them, for every warrior whose career had been cut short by invisible wounds. It was for the harrowing fight in North Africa, for McKinney, for Wren, for Colonel Kestrel, and for every member of Shadow Viper who had faced Curry's poison. And, perhaps most profoundly, it was for herself, a final, definitive declaration of victory against the ghost that had tried to silence her, to render her obsolete. Her eye opened, focused and unwavering, peering through the ChronoSight's advanced optics. The intricate holographic reticle, a vibrant green against the distant target, danced and shimmered, predicting, compensating, harmonizing with her precise intent, transforming the chaotic signals of her tremors into a single steady point of aim. The desert wind whispered, carrying the faint scent of dust and distant sagebrush. The sun beat down relentlessly. Time seemed to stretch, then compress, a single, elongated moment before the inevitable. Her finger, steady despite the tremors that ran through her entire arm, curled around the trigger, applying the slightest, most controlled pressure. The sharp, clean report of the rifle cracked through the air, piercing the expectant silence. Silence, profound, absolute, deafening silence fell over the range. Even the desert wind seemed to hold its breath, waiting. 7 seconds. 7 incredibly long, agonizing seconds stretched into an eternity, the calculated flight time for a bullet over that immense distance. Every eye was fixed on the distant target, every heart pounded with a shared anticipation. Then the voice on the radio, clear and unwavering, cutting through the heavy silence like a sharp blade. Target extinguished. Candle untouched. The words hung in the air, a final, definitive statement. The flame had disappeared, just like the first time. The impossible made possible again, a repeat of a miracle. Then the applause erupted. Not hesitant, not polite, not even merely respectful, but thunderous, overwhelming. Pentagon brass hardened generals whose faces rarely showed emotion, seasoned strategists accustomed to stoicism. They rose to their feet as one, clapping, some even cheering loudly, their voices raw with awe. Colonel Kestrel stood proudly beside Celeste, a wide, genuine smile on his face, his own hands clapping loudly, a man utterly transformed. The Shadow Viper operators, their faces streaked with dust and the lingering fatigue of their recovery, joined in, their cheers echoing across the vast range, a wave of profound relief and unadulterated triumph. It wasn't just a shot. It was a triumph of the human spirit over adversity, a legacy born from defiance. Later that evening, as the harsh desert sun began its majestic descent, painting long crimson shadows across the solemn memorial wall at Fort Ridgeback, Celeste found herself standing quietly before the etched names of fallen soldiers. It was a moment of profound quietude, a somber reflection on the immense cost of their profession, on the sacrifices made, the lives lost. A figure approached her, moving with a quiet reverence that matched her own. It was Sergeant First Class Braddock, the taciturn sniper who had quietly joined in the initial mockery of Celeste, his face now softened by understanding and respect. He held a faded, slightly creased photograph in his hand, its edges worn from countless touches. It was an old image, showing a young man with kind eyes, a confident, hopeful smile, and a sniper rifle slung casually over his shoulder. "My brother, Lieutenant Colonel," Braddock said, his voice a low, rough whisper tinged with a deep, unhealed pain that had lingered for years. He was one of the best, absolutely rock-steady hands, eyes like a hawk, until the tremors started. He paused, his gaze fixed on the photograph, his thumb gently caressing the worn surface. Not from a toxin, just from the years, from the relentless stress of combat, the cumulative toll on the body, from the invisible, silent breakdown of nerves after too many deployments. The doctors called it PTSD, nerve damage. They said it was irreversible. They forced him into medical retirement. Braddock's voice cracked, thick with unspoken grief. He couldn't live with it. Couldn't live without the scope in his hand, without the purpose. He said he wasn't a soldier anymore. A tear escaped his eye, tracing a path through the dust on his cheek. He ended his life, Lieutenant Colonel. Celeste looked at the photograph, her eyes filled with a profound understanding, a shared sorrow that ran deeper than any words could convey. She knew that specific pain, that profound existential loss of identity that came with being told you could no longer do the one thing that defined you. Braddock finally looked up, his eyes meeting hers, a new light, a fragile, tentative hope, shining within their depths. "But your tech, Lieutenant Colonel, what you've done? McKinney, he's getting a second chance. They all are. They can still serve. They can still be soldiers." He looked back at the photograph of his lost brother, then to Celeste, a silent, powerful gratitude in his gaze. "You've given them a second chance. You've given him a reason to keep aiming. You've given me hope." Celeste offered a small, sad, yet profoundly meaningful smile. Her hand still trembled, a constant, visible reminder of Corey's poison, of her own sacrifice. They would always tremble, but now they were not symbols of defeat or brokenness. They were instruments of hope, catalysts for change, guiding lights for a new generation of resilient warriors. Her legacy wasn't just in the impossible shots she fired, in the records she shattered. It was in the path she forged for others, in the lives she saved, in the definitions of strength and service she had expanded beyond all recognition. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the vast desert sky in fiery hues of orange and purple, casting the memorial wall in a somber silhouette. The names etched upon it faded into the encroaching darkness, but the spirit of resilience, born from one woman's unwavering courage, shone brighter than any setting sun. The final message, a whisper on the cool desert wind, a profound truth etched into the very heart of Fort Ridgeback, now echoed with newfound power. You don't need steady hands to be a soldier. You just need the courage to keep aiming. And sometimes the bravest fight is not against an external enemy, but against your own perceived limitations, transforming weakness into an enduring legacy of strength, redefining what it truly means to be unbroken. What an extraordinary journey we've witnessed, a profound testament to the indomitable spirit of human resilience. From the initial mockery and skepticism under the searing desert sun, to a chilling confrontation with a ghost from the past, and ultimately to a triumph that redefined the very essence of military capability. The story of Lieutenant Colonel Celeste Moreau is far more than just a tale of an impossible shot. It is a powerful narrative woven with threads of defiance, innovation, and an unwavering belief in the capacity for adaptation. We saw a woman dismissed and underestimated, whose trembling hands became the unlikely catalyst for a revolution. Her quiet strength, born from personal tragedy, challenged the entrenched notions of what a soldier should be. In a world that often equates physical perfection with absolute strength, Celeste Moreau shattered that illusion, proving that true power lies not in the absence of flaws, but in the courage to confront them, to innovate, and to find new ways forward when the old paths close. Her story reminds us that sometimes the greatest breakthroughs emerge not from flawless strength, but from profound vulnerability and an unyielding will to overcome. She didn't just adapt, she transformed the landscape of possibility for countless others. Consider the journey of Sergeant Lars McKinney. He, who initially embodied the very skepticism Celeste faced, found himself battling an unseen enemy within his own body. The insidious onset of tremors, his initial arrogance crumbled, replaced by a raw human vulnerability, and then a desperate yet courageous leap of faith towards the very woman he had scorned. His decision to volunteer, to admit his weakness, was an act of profound bravery in itself. And through Celeste's dedication and the revolutionary ChronoSight V7, he was not just saved from a forced medical retirement, he was given a second chance, a renewed sense of purpose. His powerful shot at 2,000 meters was not just a testament to the technology, but to his own spirit, to the belief that an unseen injury does not have to be an end. It reshaped his destiny, offering a horizon that once seemed impossible. And then there is the poignant story of Sergeant First Class Braddock and his lost brother. A heartbreaking reminder that behind every statistic of medical retirement, of mental health struggles, there are real lives, real families, real dreams shattered. Braddock's brother, a testament to unwavering courage and skill, was ultimately defeated not by an enemy combatant, but by the relentless march of time and the unforeseen frailties of the human body. His tragic fate underscores the critical importance of what Celeste has achieved. Her technology offers not just a technical solution, but a lifeline of hope, a profound validation that one's service, one's identity, need not be extinguished when the body begins to falter. It provides a means to continue contributing, to remain a soldier, even when the traditional tools of war seem to slip from one's grasp. This is the true legacy of Celeste Moreau. She isn't just building better scopes. She's rebuilding shattered lives and restoring lost purposes. The confrontation with Dr. Nazim Khouri was more than just a tactical operation. It was a deeply personal battle. Khouri represented the very forces that seek to debilitate, to destroy, to render useless. His neurotoxin was designed to strip away control, to reduce elite warriors to trembling, helpless victims. But Celeste, intimately familiar with his poison, turned her own past suffering into a weapon against him. Her defiance in the face of his malicious intent, her declaration that she was building resilience, not just seeking a cure, was a powerful statement for all who face invisible battles. It highlighted that true strength lies not in avoiding wounds, but in transforming them into catalysts for growth and innovation. This narrative transcends the battlefield. It speaks to anyone who has faced a challenge that seemed insurmountable, a personal limitation that threatened to define them. It champions the idea that weakness can be a profound source of strength, forcing us to adapt, to think differently, to innovate beyond conventional boundaries. It is a story about the relentless pursuit of purpose, about finding new ways to contribute when the old ones are no longer viable. It is about courage, not just the courage to face an enemy with a weapon, but the courage to face oneself, to acknowledge vulnerability, and to transform it into an enduring legacy. The final image of Celeste, standing with her trembling hands, hitting that impossible shot again, is not just a display of technical mastery, it is a symbol of profound triumph. It is a quiet, powerful echo of her unwavering spirit, a testament to the belief that the human will, when combined with ingenuity and an unbreakable resolve, can overcome almost anything. Her story, woven into the fabric of Fort Ridgeback, will undoubtedly inspire generations of soldiers and innovators alike. It leaves us with a powerful truth that the capacity to adapt, to innovate, and to refuse to be defeated is the ultimate form of strength. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. We hope this story has resonated with you, inspired you, and perhaps made you think differently about what true strength embodies. We always appreciate hearing your thoughts, so please feel free to share your reflections on Celeste Moreau's story in the comments section below. What moments stood out to you? What lessons did you take away? Your feedback means the world to us at Veteran Biker. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the extraordinary, consider becoming a part of the Veteran Biker family. We bring you stories of unparalleled courage, resilience, and the human spirit's triumph against all odds. Don't miss out on our next adventure. Make sure to hit that like button if this story moved you, and subscribe to the Veteran Biker channel to stay updated with all our future releases. And remember, there are more incredible stories waiting for you. Check out the other videos appearing on your screen now. Until next time, stay strong, stay courageous, and keep aiming high.